you and I are going to have the privilege of really enjoying true success, we must be able to define it. Most people have no idea how to define what real success means to them. Sure, they have all of society's rules for what success means, cars and homes and money and prestige or degrees or a certain level of recognizability. But you know what? That rarely creates that sense of peace, that sense of connection, that sense that our life really is at the level of quality we really want it to be. How can we define success in a way that will cause us throughout our life to not only pursue it, but to live it? I personally believe that success comes through a consistent increase in the quality of your life. Now let's think about that for a minute. Let's start with the word consistent. What does every champion have in common? Any great success, whether it be in sports, business, politics, relationships, is not consistency really the foundation? I mean, after all, anybody can get any result once in a while. But see, it's not that you're able to apply yourself once in a while. It's that absolute consistency that creates the fabric of success for a lifetime. And isn't that what you really want? You want lasting success. And that only comes from consistency. I remember Pat Riley one time speaking about the idea of the difference between having an excellent game or having game excellence. Well, what's the difference? Well, there's a very big difference. An excellent game is you go out and do something well for a very short period of time. You know, excellence means to excel, so you've excelled for a short period of time. But game excellence means that you consistently excel, you consistently expand. And that's the second part of the definition of success. That it's a constant increase in the quality of your life, in virtually every area of your life, from your spiritual life, your emotional life, your physical life, your mental life, your relationships, every aspect, your business. It's only then that we feel like we're really living life at the deepest level. So let me ask you a question. Are you truly successful right now in your life? Are you consistently increasing the quality of your life? Are you doing it in at least the 5 areas that I talk about? Are you constantly increasing the quality of your emotional life? Are you developing more passion and compassion, courage? Are you shaping yourself or allowing the environment to shape you? And is this improvement just once in a while, or is it constant? Is it daily? Even if it's on a small scale, we're not talking about huge improvements to feel like we're successful. We're talking about very small incremental improvements, because all those little incremental changes constantly come together. They accumulate to create momentum in your life and the experience of true success. How about in your physical body? Are you consistently increasing the quality of your physical vitality and energy? Or have you bought into a bunch of limiting beliefs that say, well, I'm getting a little bit older, can't quite do things the way I used to? Tell that to Marva Hooks. At age 67, this woman decided she'd become a mountain climber. And at 92, she climbed to the top of Mount Fuji, the oldest living person to make it to that peak. Not too bad, huh? What about the area of your relationships? Are you consistently improving in this area? Because I got news for you. We're either climbing or we're sliding. There's no in between. There are no plateaus. Are you improving there in your relationship with your spouse, in your relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend, with your relationship with your kids, with the people you're in business with every single day at work? What about in the area of your finances? Are you consistently finding ways to increase the quality of your economic life? And how about your time? Have you learned ways to be able to distort time, to increase the quality of the time you do have, instead of just complaining about, there's no time for anything you can really do? If you're not, I know you're not satisfied. And my bet is that no matter how well you're doing in one category, there's an area that probably isn't improving as much as you want. And the reason is we get distracted. There's so much to do in this life, and there's so many challenges. But you know what? The only way we're going to get what we really want is by understanding what's most important to us. And that is a sense of increasing quality in every area of our life. Are you sold on the concept? Okay. Then how do we change things? What if we look to an area of our life and we aren't happy with it? What do we do to change? Well, the answer is we take action. First of all, we got to get aware that there's a challenge. And just focusing on the fact that an area isn't good enough is a good first step. So you go out and you take action. Does that really change the quality of your life? The answer is yes, in the short term. And that's critical. You say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make my relationship better. And for that night or that week, you go out and you knock the socks off your significant other. What do? You go out and you take them to dinner and you write them cards and you do all these wonderful little things. They're not really big things. They're just little things, but you do them all at one time. And you know what? That relationship just grows in its quality, the quality of love and connection and emotional intensity for a week, maybe a month, or as long as the memory holds out. Because the problem is, the action was not consistent. And as a result, that same relationship someday may disappear. Because no matter how good something is, the only way we can enjoy quality in our life, true success, is through consistency. It's through consistent action. So how do we get ourselves to consistently act in a way that causes us to really increase the quality of our life daily and enjoy it? Well, in order to answer that question, I guess we have to first answer the question, what controls all of our actions? The answer to that, of course, is decisions. Whatever decisions we make are shaping all of our actions. Decision is the father of action, and it's our actions that create the results of our lives. But again, what's behind decisions? What determines what we're willing to do or not willing to do in our lives? And the answer to this question is there are two elements that control every decision you make, therefore every action you take, and therefore the increase in quality or lack thereof that you experience in your life every day. And those two elements are your standards and your beliefs. The standards you live your life by, your values in essence, and your core beliefs are controlling moment to moment how you perceive everything in your life, what you determine things mean, what you're going to do, and ultimately who you become. In fact, the most common question that people ask me in seminars is, how did you really turn your life around back then 7 or 8 years ago? Well, I look at them and I say, I did it by raising my standards. That was the number one single most important change that I made in my life. I got to the point where I said, I am not willing to live this way anymore. Who I am is much more than I'm demonstrating in my life. And I literally took out my journal and I wrote down all the things in my life that I would no longer stand for from myself or anybody I cared about. I also wrote down how I was going to live in detail. And in that day, I committed beyond a shadow of a doubt that that was how I was going to live, that I would never again settle for less than I could be. Now, sometimes people set a high standard for themselves, but they don't take any action. And the reason is because they don't change their beliefs. And that's the second thing we must change to have a long-term increase in the quality of our life. I began to believe that there was a way to turn my life around, that I had the resources. If I didn't have them within myself, I could get access to them. That if I wanted to increase the quality of my life physically, there were people who had been fat like me and had got themselves fit and stayed there. And all I have to do is find out what they did and do the same things. As I began to develop beliefs that I could in fact turn things around and that I would in fact, that sense of certainty got me to take consistent action, not just action for a moment to see if it was going to work or not. The increase in my personal standards for myself and the increase in the quality of my beliefs increased the quality of my life. They set in motion that day, immediately, a force that began to change everything in my life. But I have a question for you. Do you think that if I would have lived continuously by the standards I set for myself that day, that that would have created the quality of life that I now enjoy? The answer is no, because the quality of life that I now enjoy is a much higher standard than I had ever even dreamed of back then. There's only one way that I've been able to turn my dreams into reality, and that is what has changed my life was not a single action I took 7 or 8 years ago, not even setting higher standards then or even increasing the quality of my beliefs then. Only one thing has created a life that I now enjoy, and that is a commitment to the discipline I call Kanai. Capital C-A-N-I with an exclamation mark. What is Kanai? It stands for a commitment to constant and never-ending improvement. That core value, that core belief has permeated every experience of my life. It's who I am. I'm constantly looking for how can I improve. My standards have always got to be expanded, and so do yours if you truly want to be happy. It's the only way we're going to enjoy ourselves. Think about it. Oftentimes I'll ask people, tell me in these 5 areas of your life, Are there some areas you need to improve in? And invariably they'll say, well, my business is doing pretty good, but my relationship's not in very good shape. I guess I need to go work on that. And I turn to them and say, you just made a major mistake. Because now that you put all your focus in your relationship, your business is going to go down. Or maybe your spiritual life is not expanding. The only way our life gets better is not by once in a while jumping in with lots of enthusiasm and giving our all to make something better. It gets better by daily, gradual improvements in each of the areas of our lives. And that's what Kanai stands for, a commitment to constant and never-ending improvement. Nothing in life feels as juicy as knowing you're expanding who you are, expanding your influence, your impact, the quality of how you think and how you feel. And remember, all increases in quality are the results of improvement. And if you're constantly improving, even at the most minute level, who you are and how you live, you'll always be happy. See, we only feel frustrated when we don't feel like we're growing. And growth comes from improvement. So if I really want to find out what the level of success you have in your life is, I could say, what's your level of commitment to Kanai? What's the amount of Kanai you've developed in your relationship? Is it constant and never-endingly improving, or have you set it aside and have said, well, I'm kind of like maintaining it? I got news for you. Just to keep what you have to be improving. Things don't stay static. In life, we're either climbing or we're sliding. We're growing or we're dying. There's no in between. Hey, if you're not investing, for example, I got news for you. You aren't staying equal with where you were last year or the year before. You're losing because inflation is eating away at the base of what you have. If you're just keeping your relationship where it was when you first developed your relationship with this person you care about, I got news for you. That relationship is sliding. It is not climbing. The only way to keep the same quality is to improve, and the only way to increase the quality of life and have true success is through daily, constant, never-ending improvements, a commitment to Kanai, a philosophy and a discipline that can shape the quality of your life forever. It is the one single element that if you ask me, Tony, if there's one thing you want me to live by that would ensure my success for a lifetime, I would say commit to the discipline of Kanai. Commit to every day finding some small way to constantly and never-endingly improve each and every area of your life. And that'll give you a richness beyond anything you could possibly imagine. Because each day these tiny little improvements that seem like nothing will build one upon another until one day you wake up and discover that you're now living what was once merely a dream. That's your life. That's the richness. And it comes from only one thing, Kanai. Constant and never-ending improvement. And by the way, if you want to know where my passion comes from, my intensity, it comes because every single day I'm excited to wake up and live. Because every single day there's something I'm going to improve upon. And do you know what that does to your self-esteem? When every single day you know and you notice that you're improving in some way, it doesn't have to be huge. As I've already said, it's those little gradual ones that make the difference. Little things don't mean a lot, they mean everything. And when you notice them and when you do them deliberately, you begin to develop a sense of strength within yourself that's virtually unmatched in the people that you'll meet. Think for a moment of somebody you know who's truly happy. Isn't it somebody who's doing something they're passionate about? And doesn't that passion come from the fact that they're creating and expanding something, that they're growing, that in fact they're improving the quality of their life, and even more powerfully, they're improving the quality of people's lives around them? Which, by the way, is one of the most powerful benefits of improving yourself. The more you improve yourself, the more you have to give. And the more that you give, the better you feel about yourself. It becomes a cycle. But instead of the vicious pain cycle that most people live in, it becomes a pleasure cycle where every day you feel even better about who you are, what you're becoming, and what you're contributing. This standard of constant, never-ending improvement has caused me my entire life to constantly pursue what I now call profound knowledge. It's a term that a man named Dr. Edwards Deming created, and we're going to talk about him briefly. But what I want to tell you is profound knowledge, by definition, is information, strategies, or distinctions that are simple and universally applicable, that the minute you understand them, you can use them to increase the quality of your life. My whole world was revolutionized a few months ago when I read an article in Forbes magazine about a car that was being produced by Mitsubishi in combination with a Chrysler Corporation. In reading the article, I discovered that the car you and I know as the Plymouth Laser is exactly the same car as the Mitsubishi Eclipse. In other words, these cars are made by the exact same manufacturer. They are identical in every sense except one thing. They have a different name. And I guess the other one is they're offered by a different company. You want to know what's interesting, though? Chrysler sells an average of 14 of these per dealership. Their sales are in the ground. Mitsubishi is averaging 100 sales per dealership. Sales are skyrocketing. The same car, released at the same time. What's the difference? Well, when they went out and began to do research, they found out what you might guess. Americans said, well, you know, I really would like the Chrysler company. I'd like to buy American cars, but the Japanese make better quality. Now, when I read this, I got upset. I thought this belief system is keeping America from rebounding. I started thinking, this is ridiculous. You know, it's true Japanese create quality products, but so do Americans. I mean, how come people generalize that? Look what it's doing to Chrysler. But then I mismatched myself. And I thought for a moment, is there a good reason why most people in America would rather buy a Sony than an RCA? And there is an answer. Most American consumers clearly perceive that Japanese products are superior in quality. And you know what? They have a lot of evidence to back this idea up. They have a lot of experience. And so they don't trust the American companies anymore. They won't even buy the product when it's even made by the Japanese under the American name, in Chrysler's example. Pretty amazing. But what has made the Japanese culture so obsessed with quality? Is it just the culture itself? That's what most people would have you believe. The reality is quite different. The actual basis for the Japanese miracle finds its place in an American. What am I talking about? In 1950, Japan was war-ravaged, and General MacArthur was over there trying to get things done. He couldn't find anything of quality. He couldn't even make a phone call. Finally, in utter frustration, he decided to work with the Japanese Union of Scientists to bring over the foremost expert in quality control in the world. His name, Dr. Edwards Deming. Dr. Deming came in 1950 and began to teach the Japanese a standard to conduct all their business by. He taught them a new set of beliefs that were often completely contrary to traditional American business. And he taught them a series of strategies on how to constantly analyze and improve virtually anything they could manufacture. His philosophy was very simple. The only way the Japanese people could rebuild their economy and compete would be by setting a new standard within their businesses, and that standard was to focus on how they could constantly and never-endingly improve their quality. He said if they would increase their quality, quality would always cost less in the end. That an obsession with cutting costs and increasing revenues is what eventually destroys most companies. That most American companies' focus is on meeting a particular standard. And once we met that standard, we have satisfied customers. He said, you do not want satisfied customers. You want loyal customers. And the only way they're going to be loyal is if they believe that what they're getting from you is the highest quality possible. And if you're constantly improving the quality of what you make or what you do, they'll stay with you. He said the biggest mistake that American management makes is that they set an arbitrary standard and they believe that the only way to increase that standard is by spending more money, which would reduce their profit. He said nothing is further from the truth. Your key to success will be to make gradual, constant, never-ending improvements at an incremental level, that by constantly improving the little things, quality will come together at a level people never dreamed possible. He said, but it must be daily. It must be management. It must be workers. It must be supervisors. It must be all people working together to produce this consistently. Deming continued to come back year after year to teach the captains of Japanese business, some of which, by the way, were just getting started, little companies like Sony with Mr. Morita. He promised them that if they absolutely committed to constant, never-ending improvement in the quality of their products and services, that shortly they would flood the world with quality products and become a dominant power in industry and eventually a dominant economic power in the world. Well, to war-ravaged Japan, where you couldn't even make a phone call, this seemed absolutely absurd. But the Japanese people, the captains of business, believed him and applied what he said rigorously. A national award was developed back in 1950 in Japan called the Deming Award. For the last 40 years and continuing through today, the Deming Award represents the company that has demonstrated at the highest level the power of constant, never-ending improvement in quality. It's competed for with a level of intensity that's very difficult to even describe unless you've met a Japanese CEO, supervisor, or worker that's part of a company that's in this contest. The award is given on national television. Deming is recognized in Japan as the father of the Japanese economic miracle. And yet, we barely hear about him here in the United States. Well, that began to change a little bit back in 1980. One of our major television news magazines did a story on the American who's responsible for the Japanese economic miracle, Dr. Deming. In this story, they went and interviewed the Japanese companies that had revolutionized industry using Deming's principles. And they began to talk to Japanese officials to find out that, in fact, this man's standards, his philosophy or beliefs, and his strategies are used daily and precisely by these multinational companies to create world dominance in their area of competition. One of the millions of people who watched this show was a man named Donald Peterson, chairman of the board of Ford Motor Company. He didn't just watch this show, he took action upon it. Instead of saying the Japanese are beating us because they're lucky, he said, I believe the difference is quality. We're losing because they're building a better quality of product, and there's no reason why we can't develop better quality of products here in the United States. We're going to implement this man's standards, his beliefs, and his strategies throughout Ford Motor Company, from the top down, from the chief executive officer to the people on the assembly line. He brought Deming in, and that is when Ford changed their focus and what you heard in their ads to Ford quality is number one. That wasn't just an idea. It wasn't just an ad. It's something that Ford did throughout the entire company. They instituted trainings and seminars and brainstorming sessions, all getting people to change the level of standards they held for themselves. Rather than waiting for a supervisor to come by and say, well, that's not good enough quality, each individual began to develop a new belief that the way Ford was going to compete and win in the auto industry was by constant, never-ending improvement at the most minute level, so that everyone's contributions would create a momentum that would turn the company around. By applying this change in standards, beliefs, and strategies, Ford Motor Company by 1986 had turned themselves around from a company that was losing billions of dollars to over $6 billion in profit, from deep in the red to a corporate model of success across the United States. What were some of the specific standards and beliefs that they changed? Deming taught them that increasing quality was the only way to compete, and he got them to believe by demonstrating through statistics that quality always costs less. So you may say, well, how does this all relate to me? I'm not a business person. Well, think about it. These companies' profitability is tied directly to the amount of quality that they're able to generate for their customers, the amount of quality they're able to generate for mankind. How do you get profitability? What's the equivalent of profitability in a human being's life? I would say satisfaction, joy, happiness. That's the profit we have by living by a philosophy of constant improvement. Because when are you really happy? You're not happy because you get things. You're not happy because you're successful, or even because you've achieved your dreams. Because many people have achieved their dreams and now they're unhappy because now they say, is this all there is? The only time that you and I are happy is when we know that we're growing. And we're only going to grow if every day we're trying to improve. And the biggest mistake we make is to try and just change everything overnight. We go out and say, gosh, I'm overweight. Let me go run 10 miles. Boy, have I been guilty of this one in the past. Go out there and run your guts out, and the next day, what happens? Do you build from that level? Of course not. What happens when we go out and we just innovate, that's all we do, is we don't build a foundation to continue to expand from. If you go out and work out like that, the next day, the quality of your life goes down. What you have to do is each day do a little bit more. I have a friend that now runs marathons. And you know what? He started out one day just trying to run from his front door to the first telephone pole he could see, which was probably about 30 yards away. And his goal each day was go a little further. And that was all he did. He practiced kanai, constant and never-ending improvements. Very simple, very gradual. But you know what happened? He started to develop momentum. That's the power of kanai. He constantly was improving, and he got addicted to the feeling. And sure enough, the next day he's going further and further, and his self-esteem grew, and his physical vitality grew, until now he's a dominant force in any marathon he runs in. I'll tell you the reason why I think most people never really succeed. Number one, they don't set a high enough standard. But number two, some people set a high standard, but they don't believe they can achieve it. The power of kanai, gradual, constant, never-ending improvement, is that it's believable. Your brain says, I know I can do this. I know I can figure a way to make it just a little bit better. But when you tell yourself you got to lose 50 pounds tomorrow, your brain goes, there's no way. I'm not going to pull this off. Even if you try and set the standard for me, I'm going to rebel. And you find yourself unable to get yourself to take the very actions that are necessary for your success. Japanese companies believe that in order to grow, they need innovation, which means explosive growth, and they need what they call kaizen. Kaizen means constant improvement. In fact, the reason I created for myself the discipline of kanai, that is a word, is because the Japanese use kaizen as part of their vocabulary every single day of their life. They talk about the kaizen of their business, the kaizen of their relationship, the kaizen of the trade surplus. The constant improvement of it is what they're looking about. And because they talk about it all the time, it's a part of their unconscious thinking. You might think the word kanai, kanai, that's a corny word. Well, first of all, I didn't want to use a Japanese word when it's an American philosophy. And secondly, I wanted to remind myself with one term what I'm really committed to. Think about this for a second. When you create a word, you create a way of thinking. You see, the language that we use constantly influences our decision-making processes, in that the words that we utilize consistently carry within them encoded meanings for our lives. So in creating the discipline, the philosophy, and the science of kanai, we're creating a mindset that will continually shape the thinking and actions of all those people who use it. You might want to take this term and promote it, not only within yourself, but the people around you. It's new. You have to get used to it. But pretty soon you get excited. You start asking people, tell me something. How committed to kanai is the organization? What's the person's level of commitment to kanai? There's only one result that will consistently come from a commitment to kanai, and that is a profound increase in the quality of your life, an experience of true success. When you live by the discipline of kanai, when it's the strategy you live every day by, you will experience that constant improvement that creates lifelong joy and power. So by adopting this word into our vocabulary, we make it a constant focus. So instead of a Japanese term, we're using an American term. Constant, never-ending improvement, a commitment to kanai. Let me share with you that I believe our level of personal and professional success is in direct proportion to the level of our commitment to kanai. See, a true commitment to kanai is reflected by constant improvement in every area of your life. And a true commitment to kanai has got to be measured. You've got to be noticing along the way how you're improving. Kanai is a science. It recognizes that problems are an opportunity for growth, and it provides a system for solving problems before they even come up. The best time to solve a problem is before it becomes one. And if you're always improving the quality of what you do, you start to handle problems before they even exist. You handle them at the level where they're not quite a problem yet, but not quite right. That's how you create a life where you have momentum and power and joy. So what's valuable about kanai? It's a new standard. It's a new philosophy for you to live by. And most importantly, it's believable and achievable. Who else has used this throughout history? A gentleman who probably represents the greatest level of consistent success in sports history. His name is Coach John Wooden, the past coach of the UCLA Bruins, a man who created a dynasty beyond description. In his last years with the UCLA Bruins, Coach Wooden won 10 of 12 national NCAA championships. This is unheard of. He won 7 of these in a row. Now, to give you a perspective on how powerful this is, there have only been 4 teams since 1939 that have been able to win 2 of these in a row. His teams won 88 games in a row. He had 4 seasons where they didn't lose a game, 3 seasons where they only lost 1 game in the entire year, including the playoffs and the championship. Was this man lucky? Well, if your definition of luck is labor under correct knowledge, L-U-C-K, then I'd say the answer is you're absolutely right. He was very lucky. No, what made this man successful is he lives by a philosophy of constant, never-ending improvement. In fact, Coach Wooden, the only man to be inducted into the College Hall of Fame as both a player and a coach, and the man with the most wins in college basketball history, never talked about winning to his players. I repeat, in 27 years as a coach of the UCLA Bruins, he did not talk about winning. What he talked about constantly was that his players needed to improve themselves every day, that every day they had to make some kind of tiny improvement in what they were doing, and if they did that every day, they would truly be champions, regardless of the score. But he said, I think you'll like the score as well. More importantly than his victories on the ball court is what he did to increase the quality of life for these men, because he taught them a philosophy of life that many of them, including Kareem, acknowledge to this day. And you know what? He was able to teach these men, and they were willing to listen to him because he lived it personally. He's constantly lived by a series of principles that his father gave him, a creed when he was 12 years old. Every single day when he did a practice, his first question was, how can I improve this? How can I improve each of these players individually in some small way? He kept a journal, and he measured the results of every player during every practice they were ever involved with him in his 27 years. He can tell you how every player did every day and what he did to improve him. That's the level of his commitment. So what's the message? I've hammered at you again and again throughout this tape. It's very simple. Success in life can only be measured by the level of our fulfillment. We are only going to feel good about ourselves long term if we consistently increase the quality of our life. We can only increase the quality of our life consistently by committing to a discipline, a standard for our life of constant and never-ending improvement. Kanai. A commitment that permeates every area of our lives. And a commitment that understands that constant and consistent improvements, no matter how small, eventually produce massive increases in quality. A commitment that allows us to constantly not only maintain what we have, but go beyond it. A commitment that understands that if we don't improve, we won't even keep what we have, whether it be happiness or a level of competition in the marketplace. So the biggest mistake that most people make in their lives is they hate repetition. They say, well, I already know something. Well, I got news for you. There's a big difference between knowing what to do and doing what you know. Every master I know, whether it be a guy like John Wooden or a Pat Riley, I don't care who it is, whether it be in politics or business, is a person who's willing to do the quote-unquote boring things every single day and find a way to improve it. When I worked with Grandmaster Jun Rhee and I began to develop my Taekwondo skills, I developed my black belt in 8 months by constantly improving every time. He taught me that doing the same things over and over again was not just repetition, but if I was going to be a master, I had to find a way at some subtle level to constantly be improving those same exact actions. Remember, repetition creates a certain level of power, but repetition with kanai, with a commitment to constant never-ending improvement, creates life mastery. And lastly, I should say this. There are 3 questions that I ask myself at the end of the day. They help me to stay on track with my commitment to kanai. And they are, number 1, what did I learn today? Every day, ask yourself, what have I learned today? And it can be something very little. And if you haven't learned anything, it's time to go do something quick, even if it's late at night. Second, what have I improved? Or what have I contributed? Either one of those, in order to contribute, I think you have to improve. And again, it could be a tiny improvement. Your attention span, your touch, your focus, the way you used your physiology, the way you said thank you, the way you looked into someone's eyes. And thirdly, what have I enjoyed? Because if there's anything we want to improve in our lives, it's our ability to enjoy each and every day. We don't want to get hooked in the situation in our lives where we start taking things for granted, or we always need things to be bigger for us to be able to appreciate them. Well, maybe what we need to do is learn how to enjoy the adventure of a smile. Maybe we need to learn how to enjoy just being with the people we care about. If each day you improve your capacity to enjoy your life, then you'll live a life that other people will want to model. Your experience of life will be legendary. Don't we deserve each day to constantly improve the quality of our lives? I think you know the answer, and I hope you demonstrate it in your life. I believe that questions, asking the right questions and doing it consciously and effectively, is like giving yourself the power of dynamite to change anything, a way to blow out obstacles and a way to actually push yourself to a whole nother level. Questions themselves have so much power to create more pleasure and success in your life, or create more pain and more limitation and failure than virtually anything else out there. And when I look back on my life and where I've made the biggest changes, it's when I've learned to ask myself a brand new question. A question like, how can I do this better? How can I turn this around? How can I make this work? What's really most important in this experience for me to remember and to utilize? Those are the questions that have changed me because they've given me new answers. Everybody wants new answers, right? Don't you want new answers? How do you get them? Ask new questions. You want a better answer for your life? Ask a better quality question. So what I want to do is accomplish a couple things. One, I want to really get you to think about and experience and realize the power and impact of questions to change the way you feel, the way you think, the way you make decisions, to shape your entire life. 2, I want to sensitize you to the questions you're already asking yourself, questions you're probably not aware of. Because a lot of questions you ask yourself, you do unconsciously. You're not even aware of it. Whenever anything happens in your life, somebody all of a sudden shows up, something starts moving toward you, your brain starts asking questions. The first one always is, what does this mean? Is this going to mean pain or pleasure? And the second question is, what should I do to avoid pain and to gain pleasure? Those are the questions that are going on inside our head all the time, no matter what's occurring in our life. But I want us to become even more sensitive. So if we find ourselves asking habitual questions, that's going to mean we're going to start experiencing habitual results in our lives. And sometimes those habitual results are not the ones we want. See, if you're asking yourself questions all the time like, why can't I ever break through this? You're setting yourself up so that you can't. See, the brain is set up that whatever you ask for, you'll get. If you ask, why can't I do this? The brain will go, okay, here's why you can't do it. If you ask your brain, hey, how can I make this work? How can I turn this around? It will come up with answers. Remember, whatever you look for, you will find. Seek and you shall find. Ask and you shall what? Receive. See, this is a law. It's how your brain works. And mastering this ultimate tool changes your whole life. The third thing I want to do is get you to develop some new questions for yourself. Some questions that really empower you. Some questions that create new possibility. Make you look at your world in a whole other way. Something that will open up and cause your life to change. And finally, the fourth major result I want to come from this tape is I want you to get in your gut, not just in your intellect, a simple reality. And that is that your entire world can change at any moment in time just by asking a new question. You can literally change the way you think, the way you feel, your direction, the momentum of your life, your ultimate destiny by consistently asking new questions. My life changed when I realized that the only difference between me and the people around me who seemed to be doing better was they were asking better questions. See, my whole life changed one day when I realized that whatever I'm experiencing in life is not based on life itself, but what I'm focusing on. Focus equals reality. Whatever you focus on, that's what you get. Hey, right now in the news, you could feel really bad. How could you do that? Focus on all the horrible things in the news. It's not hard. Turn on your television set. You hear about all the murders. Did you know in this year the death toll from murder is higher than ever before? Isn't that exciting? And you can look at that and say, why are people so terrible? Why are people so destructive? And you could get yourself whipped into a frenzy about it. I'm not saying you should ignore it, but maybe a better question is, what's going on to cause this? What could we do to help change this? How can we utilize an understanding of human behavior to change this trend in our society? See, those questions will lead us to answers instead of just focusing on the problem itself. Whatever happens in life, whatever we feel is not based on the reality, but based on our focus. See, you could be really depressed right now, focus on all things that have ever been terrible in your life, or you could be really excited right now by thinking about all the great things that happened in your life, or all the things that could happen in the near future. Focus equals reality. And here's the key. If you want to change your reality, change your focus. If you want to change your focus, change the question you're asking yourself. That's the key to everything. Questions are the control tool to focus. Therefore, questions are the control to your own experience of life. If you change your consistent questions, you can change consistently how you feel, how you think, how you make decisions, and who you become. The only difference between you and other people is the questions that they ask. That's it. If you see someone who has more success, the first thing you should do is find out how do they think. See, thinking is nothing but the process of asking and answering questions. You're doing it constantly. That's all it is. Here's an example of a woman who asked herself disempowering questions. Here are questions she asked in a period of 20 minutes of herself in conversation with a friend of mine. And we just wrote them down as we listened to them. And I'll just give you a little background on this woman. She's quite unhappy. She's an artist and she was just divorced. Listen to some of the questions. First question, she looks at her artwork. She's given her heart and soul to it. And she says, is this saleable? Next question, am I doing this with integrity or is it just another sale? Think what that would do to your self-esteem to be asking that about yourself. Then our next question is, well, what does it matter anyway? How would that be for demotivating your whole life? Next question, why can't I just retire? That's not exactly going to make you a great artist and make you want to share your work. Next one, how long do I have to wait for someone to rescue me? There's a situation where you're not going to be empowered in your life, totally in reaction. Next one, what should I tell my therapist about this? Next one she said is, should I tell my therapist about this? Next she said, do I have any experience doing this? By the way, this is a question I rarely ask myself. That's one of the reasons I'm empowered. Because I kept saying, well, do I have any experience doing this? Most of the things I now do, I once didn't have any experience. I wouldn't even have tried it if I asked that question. Don't ask yourself, do I have any experience doing it? Ask yourself, who's already getting results so I can model? What could I do right now to emulate them? That's an empowering question by contrast. Next question she asked herself is, am I sabotaging myself? Remember, if you do that, you create doubt. You begin to wonder if you're sabotaging yourself. You look for reasons to back up that idea as you ask the question. Why can't I be married to a wealthy man? Why have I done this to myself? Has my entire life been nothing but a self-sabotage? Last one, why do I make myself so unhappy? Most people have a string of questions they use to destroy themselves. Don't let this be you. You got to start listening to what you say to yourself, not just what you say, but the questions you ask. They control it all. See, one day I was thinking to myself, what really makes the biggest difference in life? Who I've become, who I am as a person, where I'm going. What determines that? And my answer was, well, it's not the events that shape my life, it's the way I evaluate them. And I thought, well, evaluate is such a big word. It's true. How I evaluate, how I look at it, all those different things, that affects me. But really, if I want to take that word evaluation, since it's such a big word, and make it simpler, what is an evaluation? How could I explain evaluations in a simpler way so that people could really use it? So I thought to myself, all right, well, how would I explain it? What would I say? What is an evaluation? And I thought to myself, well, right now I'm evaluating, aren't I? I'm trying to evaluate how to describe what an evaluation is. What am I doing right now? And I noticed something. I thought, I've asked myself a bunch of questions here. I said, what is an evaluation? How can I describe it more simply? What am I doing right now? What are all those things? Those are questions, aren't they? I thought, is it possible that evaluations are nothing but questions? And I started laughing. I thought, well, isn't that a question? And I thought, and isn't that a question is also a question, isn't it? In fact, think about it yourself. Can you think of a situation where you're evaluating where you're really not asking a question? And notice I'm asking you a question in order to get you to evaluate. The point is this. Evaluations are nothing but questions. If we change our questions, we change our experience. We change who we are, how we think, and what we do. So if we want to control our life, we want to control our questions. And here is something I've already said in this tape. I want to say it again because I want you to hear me and I want you to remember this. If you don't remember anything else I say on this tape, please remember this. Whatever we ask for, we'll get an answer to. I repeat, whatever you ask of yourself, whatever you ask of your mind or the world, whatever you ask for consistently, you will get an answer, whether it's true or not. So remember the example I gave just as we started this tape. If you say, what's wrong in my life, there may not be anything wrong. But if you ask what's wrong, you'll get an answer. If you ask, how come I can never work things out, your brain will tell you because you're an idiot. See, the bottom line is if you ask, how can I make this work? How come my life is so great? Your brain will tell you because you're smart, because you've learned this, because you've applied what you know. See, we have to understand that if we seek, we'll find. If we ask, we'll receive. It's a critical distinction about questions. I know you know it, but you need to hear it enough by repetition that you remember it during those critical times when you start asking lousy questions. And secondly, remember what I've reiterated. The only difference in people is the difference in the questions they ask. Think of it. Who are the great leaders that you think of? Let's say, for example, in American history. One pops into my mind almost always is a gentleman named John F. Kennedy. I mean, here was a man who could move us, who was charismatic, who cared about people, who was able to shape a vision and get people to follow and go for it, able to show people that they were responsible for creating their future, that it wasn't just government. In fact, of all the quotes, of all the speeches he gave, one of the most highly quoted is the one where he really got us to ask ourselves a new question. You remember it, don't you? He said, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Wow, what a new way of looking at things. He got us to ask a question where we're responsible, where we're in charge, where we're here to contribute, not to take. See, that's leadership. That's power. That's vision. Another great leader, let's take Martin Luther King. He was constantly asking the question, how do we create equality? How do we turn things around? And he gave answers, nonviolent answers on how to turn things around because he asked a different quality of question. He said, how do we do this in a way that's not destructive, in a way that builds? How do we turn the dream into reality? He asked the question. He didn't give up the question until he found real answers. That's power. That's leadership. That's an ability that you and I have. You're a Martin Luther King. You're a John F. Kennedy if you just ask a quality of question that's similar. Think about it. See, Einstein asked a different question. Do you know how he came across this theory of relativity? It didn't come about because he was just this great genius. He did something you could do. He was sitting in a calculus class, and he was bored. Does that sound familiar? And what did he do? He looked at the clock. And as he looked at the clock, he asked himself a series of questions, 5 questions that really changed probably the history of physics, the history of how we look at our universe for many people. First question he said is, he wondered, just a weird, stupid question most people would have thought, how do we know what time it is? Good question. And his answer was, well, we see it on the clock. Then he asked a second question. And the question was, well, how do we see what's on the clock? His brain said, well, the light bounces off into our eyes, and that's how we see it. And then he let his brain really go nuts and ask a question most people don't ask. See, how you get new answers? You ask new questions. You want answers no one else has? Ask questions no one else is asking. His question was, well, what if? A great way to start a question. What if? That's called a possibility question. What if you could travel with the light to the clock? Like as fast as the light was going. What if you could travel the speed of light? You were like on the end of that beam of light. And he visualized that. He said, what if you're on the end of the beam of light as it went? What would you see then? And he thought, well, what you'd see is you'd actually see the actual hand go and move to that next minute. You'd actually see the time change. He thought, that's interesting. Then he asked the fourth question. What if you traveled faster than light itself? Then what would you see? You wouldn't see the clock go from 1 to 2 on the minutes. If you're going faster than light, I guess what you'd see is you'd see the clock actually moving backwards. Then he said, final question, would you just be seeing the clock go backwards, or would time itself actually be moving in reverse because you were going faster than light itself? Now, could you ask those questions and thought in a similar way? You bet you could have. The only difference is he had some references on how to be able to back up his theory with numbers and equations. That's the only difference. But the questions he asked, you could have asked as well, and you may have come up with similar answers. Isn't that fair to say? If you want to be great, ask great questions. The quality of your life is nothing but the quality of questions you ask yourself. If you ask questions like, why me? Why does this always happen to me? Then guess what? You're totally disempowered. If you ask questions like, how can I turn this around? How can I make it work? How can I utilize this? How can I use this to empower myself and others? You're going to have some phenomenal answers. And answers give you power, the power to change your world. Remember this too. Superior questions create a superior life. See, anybody who's superior in a particular area is superior because they ask questions in that area. If you know somebody who's funny, it's not because they're more funny than you are. It's because they ask a question consistently you probably don't ask, which is, what's funny about this? Or how could I make this sound funny? Or how can I make this look funny? See, if you keep asking that question, I got news for you. You'll get answers about how to make things funny. But if you have this belief inside your head that says, well, I'm a serious person, or I can't tell jokes, or I'm not very funny, or I can't do that, I can't make people laugh, that belief will keep you from ever even asking the question. Or if you ask the question, you'll do it in a state of mind where you don't expect an answer. And I will tell you, the state you ask a question in certainly affects your answers, right? If you ask a question like, well, how can I get rich tomorrow? It's highly unlikely your brain will go, well, here's 52 ways to turn it all around. But if you say, hey, how could I really make a difference? How could I add value and be profitable in the process? And you say it with a state of expectancy, your state will help you get real answers. If you ask a question expecting an answer, you'll get it. That's part of superior question asking. Put yourself in a state where you expect the answer, and if you don't get it, keep asking. The answer will come. See, I don't care if you're Einstein or if you're Disney, who's looking at an orchard and saying, how could I create something here that people from miles around the world will come to? The only way to take a vision and make it real is ask the question. But most people are afraid of asking questions, or most people have the habit of asking disempowering questions. You don't want to be part of that. When you ask questions, you accomplish three things. Number one, the minute you ask a question, you immediately change your own focus, or if you're asking someone else a question, their focus. Now, what happens when you change somebody's focus? Let's say they're really all angry and upset about something, and you come by and out of the clear blue sky, you ask them a question like, hey, let me ask you a question. Where were you yesterday at 2 o'clock? Well, the first thing it does is it interrupts that person's focus. You can't think about two things at once. They can't think about what they're upset about and the question you're asking them. So it changes their focus, and they think about 2 o'clock yesterday, and they're a little confused, and that changes their state. It's going to change the way they think, the way they feel, maybe even their behavior a little bit. Or you could come along and say, hey, I have a question for you. I know that's upsetting and stuff. Let's talk about that in a second, but I want to know one thing. Tell me about your daughter. I heard you're pretty excited about what she's doing in school. If you get that person to tell you about their daughter, focus on their daughter by asking them a question, all of a sudden, if they're proud of their daughter, watch what happens. Their state changes. They start to feel good. And when they feel good, will that change the kind of questions they ask a few minutes later? You bet. When you're feeling better, you ask better questions. If you're feeling angry, you say, why did they do this to me? How come this always happens? If you're feeling pretty good, you go, how come I got so lucky? How can I use this? How can I turn it around? So questions, number one, they change our focus and therefore our state. And all of us need the ability to change our state at any moment in time. I'll give you an example of how I use this for myself. When I first discovered the power of questions, and I started actually making this not just an idea, but really a technology, something I used on a regular basis with myself, I discovered some news one day, and I was very angry, very upset. Somebody had taken some of my stuff and stolen it, and they had put their own name on it, and I got real upset about this. And I was like, how could this person have the audacity to do this? Now, you can imagine that's not a question that probably makes you feel too terribly good, right? And I said, how could this person be such a liar, such a thief? How could they take advantage of me in this way? I was whipped into a nice frenzy. And I knew I could have changed my state by the traditional ways I've taught you. I could have changed my physiology. I could have changed my focus, but I didn't want to. But see, asking a question is easy to do, and you're doing it all the time anyway. So I asked a question. And the question I thought to myself was, what could I learn from this? And I started thinking, well, what could I learn from this? My answer was, well, I could learn the power of questions and whether they really do work even when you're upset.
So I asked the next question. I thought, okay, I was thinking about how disrespectful he was. And I thought to myself, okay, well, what do I respect about this guy? Which is the direct opposite of what I was feeling. I had no respect for somebody who cheats and connives and lies and steals. But I thought, what do I respect about this guy? And you know what the answer came up with? I asked the question really expecting the answer, and my brain first said, nothing. And I said, okay, well, what could I respect about him if I wanted to respect him? You know what my brain said? Well, at least he's using my stuff. At least he's out there trying to apply it. At least he isn't going in one ear and out the other one. I may respect the fact that in his mind, I'm sure he doesn't think he's stealing. In his mind, he's probably spreading the word. I don't know what he thinks he's doing, but, I respect the fact that he at least is listening and trying to do something with it. And somewhere in the back of his head, he's probably not trying to steal. Somewhere in the back of his head, what I respect is he probably believes he's helping other people as well. And maybe he is. Who knows? And what it did is at least made me a little neutral. Now, it didn't make me not want to take legal action, but it got me out of a negative state. See, the questions we ask change our state. If in a moment I want to feel good, all I got to do is ask myself the question, who do I love and who loves me? Wow, what a quick state change that is. In the midst of all the craziness, I can ask myself that. Who do I love and who loves me? Instantly it'll change my state. What am I grateful for? What's great in my life? In the midst of anything, if I stop, and again, here's the key, I must really want to hear the answer. I got to discipline myself to say, I really want to know the answer to this. As soon as I think about it and focus on what's great, I feel great. See, I don't need a drug. I don't need cigarettes. I don't need food. I don't need alcohol, and neither do you. What I need is to control my mind, to direct it with questions. Here's the second thing that questions do. They instantly change what you're considering and what you delete from your life. I have a phrase that I've used before, and I call human beings deletion creatures. What does it mean? Well, simply what it means is that you and I have so many things going on around us right now that we can't possibly focus on them all. We can only focus on a small amount of things at one time. We can only consider a few things simultaneously. Our brain goes a little nuts consciously. Now, our unconscious mind can do all kinds of things, but consciously we're limited in that area. So what happens is the brain spends most of its time trying to figure out what not to pay attention to. For example, right now there might be noises going on in your car or in your home. You might feel the air conditioning going against your skin. There's blood pulsating through your ear. Your heart is beating 100,000 times a day without you thinking about it. All that stuff's going on, you delete most of it. You only pay attention to a small number of things. And those are the things your brain asks questions about. Questions, again, control your focus. So think about this. If you're feeling really sad, there's only one reason. It's because you're deleting all the reasons you could be feeling good. You're deleting all the great things in the world that feel bad. And by the way, if you're feeling good, it's because you're deleting all the bad things you could be focusing on. So when we ask somebody a question, we change what they're focusing on and we change what they're deleting. For example, if right now you're mad and I say to you, hey, listen, I know you're mad, but let me ask you one question. How are you going to use this? You were deleting how you could use this. You weren't focusing on that. The minute I change your focus, you start to consider a new possibility. I bring into your focus, I bring into your reality that this could be a benefit. I change what you've deleted. Here's the third thing that questions do. They give us access to new resources. They give us power, if you will. See, if you ask a question like, well, how come I can't do this? That accesses the power to shut yourself down. If you ask yourself a question like, how can I make this work and have fun doing it? You not only get the answer of how to get the job done, which gives you resources, ideas, and thoughts you weren't thinking of. It gives you access to those ideas that are somewhere in the back of your head. It just gives you the answer. It's like pushing a button. Asking the questions like pushing a button, and you get a result. So when you say, how can I turn this around, you get an answer. If you say, how can I turn this around and enjoy the process, you get an even better answer. You get a fun answer. You get an enjoyable answer. So those are the three things that questions do. And here's the key. Questions create momentum. See, have you ever noticed when you start asking questions, let's say negative questions like, why'd they do this to me? Well, how come they always do that? Pretty soon you're asking worse and worse and worse questions. You kind of get on a roll. Same thing happens on the positive side. So questions can create momentum, and questions can be used to stop momentum if you ask a new kind of question. Now, let me offer you two giant categories of questions. Number one, empowering questions, and number two, disempowering questions. Now, I know that sounds third grade, but think about it. If you on a regular basis would just become sensitized to noticing the questions you're asking yourself and saying, hey, is this empowering me or disempowering you, that alone can change your life. I'll give you an example of the difference. My definition of an empowering question is one that provides new understanding. See, if you ask a question, it gives you more understanding, more distinctions, more ideas. You got an empowering question. Another definition might be an empowering question is one that focuses you on solutions instead of problems. See, if you're focusing on solutions, if you keep asking for solutions, you're going to get them. It's that simple. And a third way of defining empowering question for me is if a question moves you to action. If it's getting you to do something about something that's bothering you or do something about how to improve your life, now you're really expanding. Now it's really working. Fourthly, I think a question is empowering if it makes you responsible and gives you the power to make a change. That is, if it makes you not responsible in the negative sense, like, oh my gosh, you're at fault, but response-able, able to respond to what's going on because you see that you're in control, that you can turn it around. Fifth key to an empowering question, I think, is if a question makes you have a deeper sense of meaning for your life. And the sixth distinction I put down here in my notes is I think a question empowers you if it helps you to learn anything from the situation or helps you to feel or help other people to feel empowered. Now, what's a disempowering question? Those are easy. They're pretty much the antithesis. You know, a question is disempowering if it focuses you on purely the problem and not the solution. It's a disempowering question if it makes the problem bigger than it really is. It's disempowering you if it makes you unresourceful, if it puts you in a stuck state, where pretty soon you don't feel like you can turn anything around. It's a disempowering question if you feel like you're responsible, but there's nothing you can do about it. If you feel like you're out of control. And finally, disempowering questions are questions that are like endless loop questions, like, why me, God? If you ask those questions, you can go on over and over and over and come up with a zillion answers and never know for sure what things really do mean. We want to ask empowering questions. And again, the difference in the quality of people's lives is whether they ask more empowering or disempowering questions. For example, story I'll never forget. It's about a gentleman in Poland who's a writer today. And in World War II, being of Jewish descent, the Nazis stormed into his home and took his family, sent them to Auschwitz. He not only went through the horrors of the camp, but he went through the personal horror of seeing his own individual family members murdered, most of them gassed, one shot. You can imagine the intensity and the pain. He looked around and saw himself and saw everyone else, and it became clear to him from his mind, he believed that if he stayed there even another day, he would die. But unlike most of the people around him, he asked a different question. The question he asked was this: how do I get out of here today? And he asked the question with such intensity and such expectancy for an answer that every answer he got, when it didn't make any sense, he just said, how can I still do today? There must be a way. How can I get out of here today? How can I get out of here healthfully, alive today? He asked it over and over and over again, and he kept getting answer after answer, and most of them didn't work. He just kept asking the question, kept getting new answers, until finally his brain had this embedded within it. 6 or 7 hours into the day, he got his answer. Because the question was so obsessive. It was there constantly. He looked up and he saw a huge pile of bodies that had been shoveled into the back of a truck. Men, women, and children who'd been gassed and murdered, and their corpses thrown on the back of the truck naked. The gold fillings had been pulled from their teeth. Any jewelry that they once had, anything that they owned was stripped of them, including the clothing, so it wouldn't be wasted. Instead of saying, how could these Nazis be so abusive, so destructive? How could God make something so evil? Why has God done this to me? He asked a different question. He said, how could I use this? How could I use this to escape? And he instantly got the answer. In a heartbeat, without hesitating, he ripped off his clothes. He hid them, and he immediately dove into the pile of bodies while no one was looking, and pretended that he was dead, remaining totally still while his body became almost crushed by an additional pile of bodies that were poured on there. Cadavers, the smell of rotting flesh, and the rigidity of the remains of other beings surrounding him everywhere. He waited there and waited, hoping that no one would notice that he was there, hoping sooner or later the truck would drive off. And fortunately it did. It not only drove off, but when it dumped the bodies, it dumped them in a giant open grave, thank God. He remained there for hours until nightfall. And finally, when he felt certain there was no one there, he eventually crawled and extracted himself out from the cadavers. And he ran naked 45 miles to freedom. What was the difference between him and other people? He asked a better question. Think about it. I'm not saying that everyone there, if they would ask the question, would have escaped. My point, though, is if you want a unique experience, ask a unique question with total expectancy for answers. And if you don't get the right answer, keep asking it. Ask with consistency. Ask with intensity. Another example is my good friend W. Mitchell, a gentleman who found himself in a motorcycle accident with 2/3 of his body burned off. Not only did he recover from that, but then he turned around and had an airplane accident, became paralyzed from the waist down for life. And yet one of the most incredible people I know, ran for Lieutenant Governor of Colorado. He's now a speaker all over the nation. A man with real heart, real soul, a real success, with great relationships everywhere he goes, including the relationship he has with his lady. But here's the key. When he found himself in the hospital, 2/3 of his body burned off, and everyone else around him feeling sorry for themselves, saying, why me? He didn't ask that question. He asked, how can I use this? Pretty important question to ask. It's the difference in destinies. Why me versus how can I use this? He realized that being hurt and angry and frustrated wasn't going to change his life. So instead of looking at what he didn't have, he said to himself, what do I still have? Who am I really? Am I merely my body or am I something more? What am I really capable of now, even more so than before? And after his airplane accident, when now he's paralyzed from the waist down, and here he is in the hospital, he meets an incredibly attractive woman, a nurse, and he has the audacity with his entire face burned off, his skin burned off, paralyzed from the waist down. Here's the question he asked. How could I get a date with her? I said, are you kidding? When I was interviewing Mitchell, you really asked that question? He said, yeah. People said, that guy's insane. He's deluding himself. And that's what they told him inside there, his buddies that were sitting next to him there in the hospital. But you know what? A year and a half later, here he was in a relationship with her, and he still is to this day. See, questions provide answers. Questions change your life. But you must make sure you're asking empowering questions, not disempowering questions. And by the way, why questions can be disempowering questions or empowering. If you keep asking why me, again, that's what I call an endless loop. Be very careful of those. Let me give you two more distinctions about types of questions. Another way of chunking questions is, are they possibility questions or necessity questions? Interesting distinction I've made in my own life. See, possibility questions are usually languaged as, what if? What if this happens? What if I turn this whole thing around? What if I learn enough to really make my life work? What if I can learn enough to really make a difference in the world itself? What if I master this so well that I really can shape my own life and help other people everywhere I go? What if questions open up your whole life? And I ask a lot of those, because if you want to create new possibilities, it starts with your thought process. If you want to create new results, you got to think of new things. To think of new things, you got to ask possibility-oriented questions. Now the problem is some people just stay in possibility. They keep saying, what if this works out? What if it's great? What if it's always perfect? What if I turn the whole thing around? What if I get rich? What if I meet the woman I dreams? What if? But they don't ask necessity questions. Necessity questions, my language is, what must I do? What must I do to turn this thing around? Okay, that's what's possible. What must I do to make this work? What must I do to expand myself? What must I do to create financial independence? What must I do to influence my children better than the guy who sells crack on the street corner? See, you got to ask both kinds of questions, not just get stuck in one or the other. If all you ever ask is, what must I do? Your brain may begin to rebel and say, I don't want to have all these musts in my life. I don't want all this necessity. Life is a balance between possibility and necessity. You might want to look at the questions you're asking yourself and say, am I creating enough possibility? Am I backing it up with necessities to make that dream a reality? And a third way of chunking questions or looking at them is, are your questions matching-oriented questions or mismatching-oriented questions? What does that mean? Well, if you're in a matching mode, what it means is if somebody brings up an idea or concept, you ask yourself questions like, oh, what do I like about that? You're kind of matching with that person's enthusiasm. Or what's great about this? Or how can I use this? Or how is this like what I want? For example, if you're going to work with someone on, let's say, creating an agreement in a negotiation, you don't want to start with constant differences. You want to see what things you agree on first so you can get some momentum in the relationship. What's great about this? What do I agree with? What's right? It creates a real rapport. In a brainstorming fashion with people, it helps you come up with lots of ideas when you're matching. If you said, I want to change the world, and somebody said, oh, that's stupid, and immediately mismatched you, you'd lose your enthusiasm. So they might say, yeah, I want to change it too. What are some ways we could do that? What if we did this? What if we did that? What if we started with ourselves? What if we started tomorrow? What if we started with what we're doing with our family? As you ask questions like that, questions that are matching, you get a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. However, there is a time for mismatching questions. Some people never ask, well, what if it doesn't work? And you got to ask that question too. See, I used to be guilty of being a pure possibility question asker who was always matching. I always said, okay, what's possible, and how is this like what I think it'll work out like? And I had all this enthusiasm, and I never looked, well, if it doesn't work out, and I got hurt a bit. So I threw my pendulum for a while and became a total necessity person. Well, what must we do all the time? And, what if it doesn't work? And that didn't work either. Life's a balance. So let's do this. Let's take a look at areas of your life very quickly. And this is going to be part of your homework, and I'll kind of help you with it by giving you a little bit of a jump start. And you may want to listen to these questions again. Maybe you want to write them down when this tape is done. But what I've done with myself that's really helped me tremendously is I've taken areas of my life, and now I don't do it with myself as much because I've already got those locked in, but I do it with other people when people are having challenges. Take areas of a person's life and find out, what are some questions? Just ask yourself, what are some questions that you ask yourself a lot when people upset you? Now, for me, for example, if I say, how could this person do this to me? What that did is it made me angry. It made me feel like they were doing something to me. I wasn't in control. I was resentful towards this person. What I've learned to do now is if somebody does something, like, for example, let's say somebody comes up to you and they're really harsh with you, and you haven't even started to talk to them. You've done nothing wrong. A better question that I ask myself now, if somebody's really rude with me, for example, is I say, I wonder what makes this person treat people this way. Notice how different that feels. A lot different than, how could this person dare do this to me, to, I wonder what makes this person treat people this way. It changes my focus to what's going on with that person. And by doing that, I usually can find out something I can help that person with. And when I help them, they treat me great. See, part of life is being a leader. In order to be a leader, you've got to control your focus. You can't just be in reaction. The way to do that is install within yourself, just by habit, a set of questions that empower you. So I put that question, by the way, when I realized it would work, put on the visor of my car. Because in my car was one of the places I asked, how could this person cut me off like this? And I look up and see this question and say, I wonder what's going on with that person right now that makes them treat people this way. Well, maybe they're trying to make it to the hospital. Maybe something's happened I'm not aware of. Maybe they're just stressed out of their mind. I wonder what's going on in their personal life. And it made me curious instead of angry. It really worked. So I want you to take the area of people upsets. And I want you to, at the best of your ability, think of what are some of the questions. Think of a time when you really got upset, and then what were you saying to yourself? What were you asking yourself? Write that down and come up with a better solution and write it down on your page, a better question. Here's another area I hear all the time in seminars. People are asking themselves questions like, why can't I get ahead financially? Or how come every time I start to do well financially, I sabotage myself? A better question to ask in the area of money is, what do I really want? What am I really committed to, not just interested in financially? Who's doing well that I could learn from? How could I develop financial security for a lifetime instead of just for the moment? See, if you ask questions like that, you can get the resources to turn yourself around financially. What other areas? How about food and weight? You know, I always love talking to people who can't lose weight, and the reason they can't lose weight is that very phrase. They ask questions like, how come I can never lose weight? Well, think about that. If you ask a question like, how come you can never lose weight, your brain goes, because you're a pig. I mean, come on, you don't want to do that. A better question than how come you can't lose weight is, how can I lose weight? Of course, then your brain will probably say, go on a diet. And then your brain will say, oh, yeah, but that's painful. So ask a better question. Ask, how can I lose weight now and enjoy the process? See, if you enjoy the process, your brain will come up with a fun way to lose weight. Maybe it has something to do with exercise. Maybe it has to do with sampling new kinds of unique foods that happen to also be better for you. There's all kinds of possibilities, but you don't get the possibility till you ask a better question. Now, I've dumped a lot on you in this tape. I've dumped so many questions on you. Your brain may be fried. The idea here is to stimulate you to think. I want you to realize thinking is nothing but the process of asking questions. And I want you to think about the quality of it. Are they empowering? Are they disempowering? Are they giving you new possibilities? Are they being backed up with the necessities necessary to turn dreams into reality? Are they causing you to build something or tear something down? And in asking those questions and looking at them, realizing that if you want to, at any moment, you can change your whole life by asking questions.